you got a camera in your film, and then everything's on the record unless I say otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm really honored to have the ambassador from Afghanistan, from the Czech Republic, as well as a high-ranking political liaison from the Republic of Azerbaijan in Charlottesville. We were, by we I mean I, was sitting thinking about what I could do to enrich the experience of the community and to export some of the interesting historical realities that were born out here in the Charlottesville area. And it occurred to me that on the Foreign Affairs Committee I had the great opportunity to get to meet and know leaders such as these gentlemen, as well as one who I hope will join us soon. And for me, and of course there's I think 41 public high schools in the district. We've been to 29, we're going to get to 41. But I love engaging young people. It was Jefferson who said, as we learned today, that young people are the future. It's certainly an observation that seems obvious on its face, but is all too often, I think, neglected in the engagement of leaders. And it's interesting what we were discussing as it relates to the vision of the president in Afghanistan and sort of bringing young people in. You're 34 years old and you're the ambassador to the United States. You must have done something right. But yesterday, these gentlemen, as well as our colleague from Azerbaijan, engaged with students at the University of Virginia, amongst other things, on the impact of the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights on their various countries. And I think all accounts would indicate it was a success. It's our intent to do this again in September with leadership probably from other nations and perhaps from some of the same nations, if you would join us again. And then this morning we were joined by these wonderful distinguished international friends here at Monticello to sort of view firsthand the amazing things and even some of the darker legacies, right? We stand in a room that acknowledges that this very same man who wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all people were created equal was also overseeing the lives of some 125 human beings in the form of slaves here on this place. So that the paradox of an imperfect person who gave us near-perfect ideas is something that as a nation and as a world we have to acknowledge to learn from it. But it's just been a delight. I'm very proud of having contacted the university and having been able to bring these fine leaders to our community. I hope that you all have learned some things from us. I know that I have learned a lot of things from you. And I hope again to continue this tradition moving forward with the university community. And you're the second representative from the Czech Republic to have visited Monticello. Zdeniak came prior to your arrival.
And I've been here already like 20 years ago, so I can compare what changed in the exhibition.
So with that, I'll open it up to questions, but I want you to not neglect these two men who've seen a lot of things that I will probably never see. In some instances, I regret that. In some instances, I'm glad. But they bring a lot, and I'm just proud and honored to have them here. Because I think that we have a lot of lessons to learn and a lot of lessons to share.
Okay. Can we get you guys just a step closer a little bit?
You should have said that 5 minutes ago. That's all your B-roll there.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
What was it in Animal House? He said that we quit when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor.
Right.
Right. He's on a roll.
Right. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's roll.
So are we going to talk to them one? I mean, like at the same time, but one at a time.
That works for you. That works for you. Let's do that. Do you want to start with just Tom?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. We'll start with you then, Tom.
Sure.
All right. Okay.
All right, so can you just tell us kind of the purpose of what you guys are out here doing today?
So yesterday we met with students at the University of Virginia. Today we were taken around Monticello. I think that we need to acknowledge Jefferson's shortcomings, the fact that he was a slave owner, along with acknowledging that an imperfect person gave us a near-perfect document. And that's something that we can share with the world, that we're flawed and imperfect, but that we have some things that are great. When we get done talking, we should stop and listen. There are things that we can learn. So to have representatives of Azerbaijan, of the Czech Republic in the form of the ambassador, of Afghanistan in the form of the ambassador is an amazing opportunity for us to learn from them and us to share some of the mistakes we've made as well as some of the great successes that we've had. These are global things, and I think Jefferson said this ball of liberty is now rolling such that it cannot be stopped, or something to that effect. The unique experiences embodied by Azerbaijan, which has as a neighbor to the north, Russia, and to the south, Iran, of the Czech Republic, which is a proud and talented nation that gave us things like really, really fine beer and crystal, of Afghanistan, which has been a cultural crossroads for the time of recorded history, with the proud people who've been subject to all sorts of external forces, brings together, I think, an eclectic mix of nations. But in seeking to make yourself better, and Jefferson again said, I cannot live without books, in seeking to make yourself better, it's important to acknowledge that there's always something to learn. So that was really the goal. And again, this is something that I just kind of came up with at my desk 4 or 5 months ago. The university, I think, was delighted. I'm excited just to have some fine students engage and question and learn and share. So that's what's going on here.
Yeah, and so as you kind of were going through this, historic area here, what were some of the things you guys talked about?
A lot of it, and I want to open the floor, but first I should tell them to talk to you, and then I talk the whole time, right? But a lot of it was about the person who was Jefferson, the paradoxes of Jefferson. I think as it relates to slavery, Jefferson acknowledged in his own words that he knew that it was sort of an unsustainable evil. But as brilliant as he was unable to break the code on how to move away from that in a period of time appropriate, right? I mean, there's no greater evil that could be perpetrated on a human by another human, save murder or rape, than slavery. It's evil. And yet, the ideas of liberty were articulated in a foundational document by a fledgling nation to the world. So you have this paradox. And so how do we, in the preamble to the Constitution, the founders didn't say, here's your perfect union. They said a more perfect union, which acknowledges the need to move forward. So this exchange hopefully helps us do that as an American nation, but also as Czechs, as Afghans, and as a global community, that there are things we can learn from each other, that good enough is never good enough, and that we need to keep talking and keep learning from one another.
I think this really speaks volumes since you're.
Do either one of you all want to touch on some? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. From you, Congressman, I think it speaks volumes, especially with on a world standpoint, with a country that we're still technically at war with. We want to tell people watching this of why this is so important to, as you mentioned, like work together with other countries and world relations.
But at the risk of sounding rude, we've never been at war with Afghanistan. We've been at war in Afghanistan.
Right, in Afghanistan, yeah.
And this gentleman to my left, your right, is my friend, and it's my honor to have him here. And the long-term goal of things like this is to avoid things like that. Without delving too deep into the origins of our involvement in Afghanistan, it was an American government that empowered and exploited largely illiterate people to get them to fight the Soviets, right? Mm-hmm. And so then fast forward a decade, and bin Laden finds a home in the radicals who had sort of co-opted the power in this nation, and then 9/11 happens, and then we're essentially reaping the harvest of the seeds that we had planted. Now, I understand and don't take exception with some of our policies as it related to the Soviet Union. Communism's brought forth the death of 100 million people. But with more foresight, perhaps we can avoid the legacy that manifests itself on September 11th. But again, with no intent to be rude, we've never been at war with Afghanistan. We've been at war
absolutely.
in Afghanistan. I'm not trying to be.
No, I understand.
But it's a pretty important distinction for me and.
Of course. My last question, so we can open the floor to them, is about the shutdown last night. Can you kind of tell us, 8.5 hours or so before the president signed the bill, if I'm correct, what happened? Are you frustrated at all with the Senate, or what are your thoughts on what happened last night?
Well, it's ironic that we stand at the home of Thomas Jefferson, who drafted the Declaration of Independence, which was signed by people who knew when they put their name on that paper that if they were captured, they would be killed. And we've devolved into a political class with the inability to say no. I voted against the National Defense Authorization Act, even though people would describe me as a hawk, because 30 plus years ago, the Department of Defense agreed with other federal agencies to be audited, and it's never been audited. To continue to spend and spend and spend is a symptom of a political class without the courage to do what they think is right when it's too difficult. And the standing for re-election, having done what you said, even when it was difficult or uncomfortable, is the hallmark of who we are supposed to be as a people. So I voted against that. I think President Trump was wrong to capitulate on heightened spending. He can spend it however he likes. We need to draw lines and ensure that taxpayer dollars are being spent efficiently and on the core essential functions of government. We're not doing that. It wasn't okay when President Obama spent profligately. It's not okay when President Trump does it. So yes, I'm frustrated.
And still no deal in DACA. Where do you hope in the next couple weeks that, where's the immigration deal in this budget?
That's going to start in the Senate for sure. Because that's a chamber where I think they can get something out. But I've spoken with dozens of DACA recipients, and dozens may be low. They can prove it because they filmed me. I'd love to have a solution for DACA. I don't think deferred action is the proper long-term solution, but I'm not going to vote for anything until we secure our southern border. To do the same thing again and again and expect a different result is the definition of insanity. And I've said this to these people with whom I've spoken, that I think border security should be this and that, not a this then that. We tried this in '86 with a this then that, and it failed. And I haven't had any of the people with whom I spoke who were DACA recipients have a problem with that. So I think if we set aside some of the hyperbolic rhetoric, that we can get something done. But right now, people need to sort of step back from the rhetorical ledge, acknowledge the existential reality to the young people who are DACA recipients, and also acknowledge that it makes no sense not to take action to secure our southern border.
Immigration is something that kind of brings the whole world together. Is that something that you guys spoke about today at all?
I don't have a recollection of discussing immigration, ironically.
Over the lunch we will.
A question for the ambassadors. Excellencies, was there anything in particular you learned on your tour of Monticello today that you don't think you would have encountered otherwise in any other way?
Ambassador,
Well, for me, it's quite interesting to visit the places connected with the beginning of the American democracy, because for us Europeans, it's a reminder that American project is still relatively young. 200 years of history is something what we sell in antiquity shops. It shows us that a project that young really went through tremendous development, which is more or less like a laboratory of the world democracy. And if you want to interpret correctly today, you must know what was the original invention and intention. So I learned a lot about this original merger of the European, in Jefferson's case, French culture in Virginia, how it interacted together, and how the interpretation of his interaction developed during the years. Because I was here first time like 20 years ago. That time I was given a little bit different tour with a different interpretation of what I've seen.
Well, although an ancient country, Afghanistan is a young democracy, so I think seeing that democracies are imperfect is kind of a reassurance that we are going through difficult times, but we are not alone. And the fact that people's voice is important, and that it changes interpretations, but it also changes the course of history when people speak, and that's where a country's legacy is defined.
And if you guys can't tell what was meaningful about this trip from those two answers, I mean, it just, for me, these are two men who I admire, but yeah, I mean, that's what we want to take from this, that there are things to be learned from each other, that this is fragile and fledgling and still something meaningful.
Absolutely. I think for at least it's incredible for Afghanistan to see this, but at the same time, Afghanistan has come a long way in the last 17 years thanks to the United States and your support. And the American people, it's wonderful to engage with students that we did yesterday who knew so much about our country and had such thoughtful, profound questions about how do we move forward and build this partnership or move this partnership from threat onwards to opportunities.
Your Excellency, you said that it really is a moment for your country to be here. What do you want your people who see this to take away from this? Why is this so important for you and the people in your country?
Well, Afghanistan sees the United States as its foundational partner. And it's important for us that the American people, not just its government, know what we have to offer and how thankful the Afghan people are for this partnership and what we have been able to achieve together. This is one of the ways we engage with the American people, and the students are a great window into the insights of how people think and what kind of learning is achieved here in the U.S. about Afghanistan. Yesterday, the students asked some amazing questions. I was totally impressed by their intellect and their deep knowledge of our two countries' partnership. But they also asked some challenging questions, which I think we together as two countries and two partners need to answer as we forge our partnership.
For both of you, how do you take, something that you've learned here today through this interaction and apply that, and help your countries?
So, I don't want to dominate all of the conversation.
You start. I will have time to develop my answer.
Well, like I said earlier, democracies are imperfect, and but its beauty is in the fact that we can discuss our issues and come to a consensus and resolve them. For a young democracy in Afghanistan, whose recent institutions are only 16 or 17 years old, it's important to know that we cannot have, or that the good enough is not the enemy of the perfect. In this case, we want to march forward with what we have and build the future that we all want to build together.
And for Czechs, this year we celebrate 100 years of Czech Republic, former Czechoslovakia, which, without common people to know too much, was actually proclaimed in Philadelphia with a constitution written in Pittsburgh by the first president, whose son was American with his American wife. So we are very much American introduction into the Central European world in a way. And for us, there is one lesson that if you want to understand who you are, you must constantly go back to your history and be able to interpret it and reinterpret it. And for Czechs, it's amazing how much money Americans spend on researching your own history, on the documentary movies about the smallest obscure figures of your history, 200 years old, which we would almost not to be considering a history, and you still have a 2 hours PBS documentary on it. We love it, and we would like to do the same with our own Czech history, because we do understand why it is important.
It was when I was in the military. I had the real blessing of living very close to the Czech Republic, and I think in Pilsen, which is the second largest city, that one of the streets is American Street.
Yeah.
And the United States actually liberated a great deal of the Czech Republic at the end of the Second World War, and then only to go to a negotiation table and hand it over to the sphere of influence of the Soviets. And if you're familiar with hockey, Hasek's number was to commemorate the uprising, which was repeatedly beaten down by the Soviets. But the Czech people never stopped, in any number of different ways, resisting and sort of demanding freedom and autonomy. And it's delightful, and I look forward to the opportunity to get to know Afghanistan better. But that to me is a lesson of how the United States, who had been militarily engaged in the Second World War, by virtue of lack of foresight, left 10 million people to toil under the oppressive boot of a Soviet regime for half a century. And maybe we get to know each other better, we exchange stories, and we avoid some of these mistakes moving forward. Again, we weren't at war with Afghanistan, we were at war in Afghanistan. But now Afghanistan's trying to integrate into the world community. There are issues that we want to deal with, there's corruption here, there's corruption there, things like that. But getting to know each other and understand each other and learning about mistakes that were made in 1945 or in 1985 that begat bad outcomes later, hopefully helps to avoid them in the future. So.
Definitely does. And the Czech lesson in that if your original name is Bohemian, because Czechs are Bohemians, there is a deep connection between being Bohemian and being free.
Yeah.
I have never seen a Bohemian who is not at least mentally free. So we know why we have soldiers in Afghanistan, and we know that it's not for just freedom there, but it's for the freedom here in the United States, back in Czech Republic and Prague, that it's our common goal to fight evil where we can, and that we go the same road.
And for the good
On
people
that
of
note.
Afghanistan as well.
Well, on that note, I would like to pay tribute to over 1 million Americans who served in Afghanistan. It's a better country due to those sacrifices. They fought shoulder to shoulder to us against terrorism, and we're building a better country for our people that serves our people, and a better government that can provide for the people and defend against them. Many people forget and don't really know how far we have come along in this exercise or our experiment with democracy. It's a country that is still have many challenges, as the Congressman mentioned, but our challenges are more in par with what the rest of the world has. We have troubles with our budget. We have trouble passing our budget through our parliament. We have issues like how do we draw the boundaries for our districts, electoral districts. So there are a lot of challenges that we still have and will continue to face, but they're the kind of challenges that the other countries across the world also face. And we're still grateful that we continue to have partners like Czech and the United States assisting us in the fight against terrorism. Together, we are going to build a better world.
I think, and I didn't know we were going to go down this road, but I don't want to miss this opportunity. 1 million men and women, American men and women, some of whom have left their all in Afghanistan. That's exactly why we got to get this right. How many Afghans have given their lives? Hundreds of thousands. So the impetus here is to not let these sacrifices, Afghan and American and Czech, to go in vain. But again, this sort of thing makes me so proud and happy because I want to be in Congress and feel like I'm accomplishing something. And I think what happened here the last 2 days and what will happen again here in September is that this has meaning, that this might tangentially even change the lives of some of the young people who got to interact with you all. That this might breed some understanding in arenas where it hadn't existed. That it's okay to acknowledge that Jefferson was a slave owner, but the Declaration of Independence was brilliant, right? That one is horrible and the other is great, because we have to know the bad in order to get to the good. And it's the same with international relations. But yeah, thank you for that, because again, we need to get our foreign relations right. Too many people have given too much for us to get it wrong.
Thank you, Congressman.
Anything else from anybody? I think we're pretty good.
Yeah, sorry for...
No, it's okay. For Bethy, can we get you to say and spell your first and last names, please?
Sure. Mine is Hamdullah Mohib. Hamdullah is spelled as Hamdullah, and Mohib is spelled as Mohib.
And your title?
Ambassador of Afghanistan. Ambassador.
And for you?
And I am ambassador of the Czech Republic to the United States, and my name is Hynek, Kmoníček, and it's spelled so horribly that I will give you the card.
Thank you.
Actually, let me...